Hello! Happy Wednesday! Is anybody here? Oh, got that bright light again. Give me 1 second, I'm going to adjust that. That should maybe help. Hello, Sharkies! Yeah, help a little. Hello, Farmhouse! Look what I got. Bam! What do you think? Hey, Books, Brews, and Booze is here too. Wow, everybody's showing up right on time. This is officially the 1 year anniversary stream. But I'm not going to do anything to celebrate today. I'm going to wait till Friday. Had a busy weekend and week leading up till now. Was out in Chilliwack yesterday visiting my mom. How does that look? Oh, if I do that, you can see it on the screen a little better. Looks like a small company of goats. Well, it says bard. It's supposed to be a very grim looking bard. I wonder whether I should make the background of this text window a little bit more opaque. For most things it works out fine. Like just the white text is alright. But for things like this, sometimes it's a little hard to see. Yes. It's harder to see if you've got your screen set to dark mode. On light mode, it's much more visible. But yeah. That is one of a few, but 3 of them are currently pending approval. So there are actually 3 more emotes that I have uploaded. They're just, we can't use them yet. You see, wait, can you see the other ones? Let me refresh, maybe it has gone through since I started. No, for me I can't use them yet. I can use Angst and Bard. I am very warm. Right now. We've got air conditioning, but yeah, I think I could actually just make this window maybe a little bit more opaque in some way. I'm just wondering if I can do it like partially opaque. Let's see if I can see an easy way to do it. So I'm pretty sure there was something with that, but we were leaving it somewhat transparent because opacity was a little odd before. Let's see. Transform. No, I don't want to do any of that. Set color. No, I don't want to do that. I mean, it's not super vital to get it done right this moment. I just wanted to see whether if I do like this. Whoa, that got weird. Let's just make that normal again. One of those things. Yeah, I can figure it out later. So, how's everybody doing? Happy Wednesday. would like to give a big thank you to Farmhouse and the Sharkies for having stuck with me for an entire year at this point. It's kind of bonkers, isn't it? We've been reading books here for a year together. We've gotten through, what, like 6? Oh, should be able to see the thing. Let's see. I'll post it again. Sam. Bard. We officially have a button for when things get grim. And soon, there'll be a few more options. I suppose I could just show them, but does everybody want to see what the other ones look like? Farmhouse has seen them already. I can also show sort of a little blown up what Bard actually looks like. So this is actually sort of the full image for our grim Bard. Get the reflection gone. And then this one is currently pending approval, which actually, from what I can tell, looks quite good in the shrunk down form. And then yeah. These were all done for me by my friend Star, who is a very talented artist. Oh, and of course, the slightly remixed Hank in the very magical script, which again looks pretty decent when it's shrunk down. So those 3 are all just sitting uploaded already, but they're just pending approval. I guess just in case there's anything unsavory in there that they don't want to slip through. Also looks like ham. So yeah, I was thinking Friday. You know, people usually have a little more time and energy on Friday nights than we do on Wednesdays. Usually we end up doing a little shorter on Wednesday and a little longer on Friday. So figured I'd save Friday to be the real sort of anniversary stream. But with that said, I have no ideas. I don't know. What should we do to celebrate? Is there anything that I can do to jazz this up and make things entertaining for everyone? Sharkies approve of the Friday party? Yeah. Get some... I know before, the last time we did sort of a little celebration, I think it was for finishing The Hobbit, right? I think we did a little sort of first book celebration, and I had some desserts and drinks and things over on this side. Maybe something similar to that. Although I feel like it's a little weird just with me having desserts and then you all watching me have desserts. So what can I do? What can I do to entertain, to so that we can all have fun? Any thoughts? Anything everyone out there in the wide world wants? The wide world through the web? One thing that I can do is take a shot between now and then at setting up. I received as a somewhat belated, received a birthday present of a new camera. which should be pretty nice. So I could set that up and also possibly have 2 cameras set up. So that if we ever want to read some comics or something like that. So I could try and get that running and see how that looks. And the new camera is actually, I think, a little bit nicer than the current one that I'm using. So maybe the picture quality will be a little snazzier, assuming that I don't horribly mess it up. Share a recipe. Yeah, I was kind of thinking like I could like create sort of a, I don't know, menu or something that others could take a shot at, but that is a little odd to organize over a period of 2 days. We can think about that for whatever the next celebration is, though, and try and organize it further ahead of time, maybe. Books, Brews, and Booze. You've got more experience as a streamer than I do. Design a drink. Oh boy. I feel like that requires me to have like knowledge of like flavor profiles or something and other technical things. Otherwise, who knows? It might just end up tasting like toothpaste. Oh, hey, it's a puppy. Hi, puppy. Knowledge? Nah. Look at this pup. Oh, wait a second. There's a pup. Oh, that was very polite of you. Took it very gently. You do a little dance up, up, up. Okay, that's it. All gone. I mean, yeah, if it would be entertaining for people for me to be drinking on stream, I don't know if there's any rules against that. I don't think there are. I could take some shots every time a bingo item comes up or something like that. Back this way a little. Or non-alcoholic. Well, yeah, but what's the fun of that? Hey, pup. Hey, pup. Looks Bruce and Boo says, hey, pup. But yeah. BBAB, what do you think? Any thoughts as to what I should do to celebrate my 1-year anniversary of the stream on Friday? As the more experienced streamer, I think. Are there any traditions I need to respect? Better than the drink you came up with. The Tropical Booger. That doesn't sound familiar to me, no? Do I want to know? That sounds some... I don't know if that sounds very appetizing. It's so warm here right now. I mean, not compared to some other places. When we were out in Chilliwack yesterday, it got up to like 37, 38 degrees Celsius, which is like basically 99 degrees Fahrenheit, I think. Today is slightly cooler, especially because we're back at our house and the temperature isn't quite so high here. So it's been like 30 degrees outside. think it's 28 outside now, but it's getting quite warm inside. Our air conditioning is not fully keeping up with it. I guess a series of days of heat in a row is pushing it. But it should be cooler again tomorrow, I think. A little bit. So, you know, stay cool, stay hydrated. Hopefully the house cools off a bit as the day goes on. Sometimes I feel like the house, it gets warmer inside the house as it goes towards evening. Apparently that has something to do with, I think, the way that like UV radiation works. When the sun is up outside, the outside of the exterior of the house and the roof tiles and things reflect the UV radiation outwards. And so more UV radiation goes away from your house than into it. But once the sun is gone and the house is soaked up all that heat, it starts to come inwards instead. Is my sort of rough understanding. I might be getting it a little bit wrong. So it may not be precisely that, but I think it's something to do with something like that. So as it gets dark outside, it can actually warm up inside the house even though it's getting cooler outside, which seems backwards and wrong, but ah, yes, that's true. Many of our alcohols have been packed away. I mean, yeah. Where? I don't know if they're accessible or not. Were they sealed up in a box? If they're up in a box, then no, they're... Yeah, I think they were. I think they were sealed up. They're sealed. Let's see. I have no idea how long it takes for emotes that are pending approval to get approved. Let's see if I can get a estimate. Typically take between 8 and 24 hours. But sometimes much less time than that. Alright. That's weird because I did upload Bard at the same time as all the others, and so I'm not sure why that one got approved when the other three did not. They were like, we'll trust you for one, but the other three you gotta wait. Oh, well, they should be ready for Friday. Yeah, so how about this book, huh? How about Magician's Gambit? Book 3 of the Belgaria by David Eddings. How about that? Let's see. So, we had begun part 3 last time, on I guess Friday. Look at that. I wonder whether the new camera will autofocus a little smoother. That'd be nice. So we read chapter 13, leaving the Vale of Uldur and heading for Ulgo land. And that was after, I guess we had previously read chapter 12, I think we'd read 2 chapters, where we met Beltira and Belkira and Beldin. Beltira and Belkira, of course, were the twins, and Beldin kept getting referred to as a dwarf. I don't know. I believe they mean that in more of the, you know, small human sort of way rather than the, you know, like Tolkien-ish dwarf. Because I don't think there are, you know, anything like that in this world. The interactions with Belden were quite interesting. He's a bit crude in just about every sense of the word. Yeah. And he gave some information about what had happened, why there was that eruption, that volcanic eruption, while everyone was in Nyssa, due to Torak's body being moved. And talked about where it got moved to by Zedar after the Orb of Aldor was stolen from Zedar. Yeah, and then it was determined that they were going to head to Prolgo in Ulgoland. So they started that journey. There was a bit of a fight with some Algroths, which kind of just happened off screen, because Garion didn't really go with, so we didn't really see what happened there, but it seemed to work out fine, though this is where we learned that Mandaralin has picked up the habit of laughing as he rides into battle now, as a way of combating his fear, or maybe his fear of being afraid. Bit of a character change. Then we did witness a fight against some of the Hrulgan, where Hetar attempted to... He took a shot at taming a stallion, but it just wouldn't work. The madness of the monsters, which we have heard of before, because the monsters weren't always mad. Back before the world was cracked by Torak and the Orb of Aldor, the monsters, I think, were just like any other animal. But once Torak cracked the earth, the monsters all went mad. And so that, I think, is why the Hrulgan are as dangerous as they are, and as untamable, it seems like. And they also, I think, sort of wandered off and took out some Murgos that were following them or something right at the end of that chapter. So a fair amount of confrontation in chapter 13. Oh, maybe not. Maybe it was the Hrulgan and then the Algroths. There were no Murgos. It was Hrulgan then Algroths, because the Murgos are afraid of Ulgoland, was the thing. They didn't need to worry about Murgos there, because the Ulgos come out at night and kill them in their sleep. So that's where we're at. We are on chapter 14 on page 154 in my copy. Oh, look at that sun dappling. Everybody ready? Let's read a book. Chapter 14. The snow gradually slackened throughout the rest of the day, and by evening only a few solitary flakes drifted down through the darkening air as they set up for the night in a grove of dense spruces. During the night, however, the temperature fell, and the air was bitterly cold when they arose the next morning. "How much farther to Prolgu?" Silk asked, standing close to the fire with his shivering hands stretched out to its warmth. 2 more days, Belgarath replied. "I don't suppose you'd consider doing something about the weather?" the little man asked hopefully. "I prefer not to do that unless I absolutely have to," the old man told him. "It disrupts things over a very wide area. Besides, the Gorim doesn't like us to tamper with things in his mountains. The Ulgos have reservations about that sort of thing." "I was afraid you might look at it that way," Their route that morning twisted and turned so often that by noon Geryon was completely turned around. Despite the biting cold, the sky was overcast, a solid lead gray. It seemed, somehow, as if the cold had frozen all color from the world. The sky was gray, the snow was a flat, dead white, and the tree trunks were starkly black. Even the rushing water in the streams they followed flowed black between snow-mounded banks. Belgrath moved confidently, pointing their direction at each succeeding valley intersected with another. Did it say all that just in this chapter? No, it didn't. Okay. We've got Geryon as young man, Barak as big man, Dernick is practical man, which sounds like a really boring superhero. Nice. Mr. was already starting the actions. Oh boy. I didn't even think of it when I said it. Mandarellen is manly man. Yes. And Aunt Pole is woman. I can probably do better. Mandoralen. All right. Hem. Are you sure? The shivering Silk asked him at one point. We've been going upstream all day. Now you say we go down.
We'll hit another valley in a few miles. Trust me, Silk. I've been here before.
Silk pulled his heavy cloak tighter. It's just that I get nervous on unfamiliar ground, he objected, looking at the dark water of the river they followed. I wonder if, while they're taking this route, if Silk is just memorizing the path instinctively. He does always seem to, anytime they're in any city, he always knows every back alley and back door and what have you. From far upstream came a strange sound, a kind of mindless hooting that was almost like laughter. Aunt Pole and Belgarath exchanged a quick look. What is it? Geryon asked.
Rock wolf,
Belgarath answered shortly. It doesn't sound like a wolf.
It isn't.
The old man looked around warily.
They're scavengers for the most part, and if it's just a wild pack, they probably won't attack. It's too early in the winter for them to be that desperate. If it's one of the packs that has been raised by the Eldrakyn, though, we're in for trouble.
Eldrakyn. It's spelled with a capital E. Eldrakyn. 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 But it wasn't a rock. It was a rock wolf. Stir. Key. He stood up in his stirrups to look around.
Let's pick up the pace a bit, he called to Mandarellen, and keep your eyes open.
Mandarellen, his armor glittering with frost, glanced back, nodded, and moved out at a trot, following the seething black water of the mountain river. Behind them, the shrill, yelping laughter grew louder. They're following us, Father, Aunt Pole said.
I can hear that.
The old man began searching the sides of the valley with his eyes, his face creased with a worried frown.
You'd better have a look, Pole. I don't want any surprises.
Aunt Pole's eyes grew distant as she probed the thickly forested sides of the valley with her mind. After a moment, she gasped, and then shuddered. There's an Eldrakyn out there, Father. He's watching us. His mind is a sewer.
They always are,
the old man replied.
Could you pick up his name?
Gruul. Grul. Gruul.
That's what I was afraid of. I knew we were getting close to his range.
He put his fingers to his lips and whistled sharply. Barak and Mandaralin. Yeah. I was thinking it, even though that's Zool, but it's got the same ool sound. Barak and Mandaralin halted to wait while the rest caught up with them.
We've got trouble,
Belgarath told them all, seriously.
There's an Eldrakyn out there with a pack of rock wolves. He's watching us right now. It's only a question of time until he attacks.
What's an Eldrakyn? Silk asked.
The Eldrakyn are related to Algroths and trolls, but they're more intelligent. And much bigger.
But only one? Mandaralin asked.
One's enough. I've met this one. His name is Gruul. He's big, quick, and as cruel as a hook-pointed knife. He'll eat anything that moves, and he doesn't really care if it's dead or not before he starts to eat.
The hooting laughter of the rock wolves drew closer.
Let's find an open place and build a fire, the old man said. The rock wolves are afraid of fire, and there's no point in fighting with them and Gruul if we don't have to.
There, Dernick suggested. Because, of course, Dernick's fire? Did somebody say we're gonna make a fire? I got it. I've got this. Pointing to a broad, snow-covered bar protruding out into the dark water of the river. The bar was joined to the near bank by a narrow neck of gravel and sand.
It's defensible, Belgarath,
Barak approved, squinting at the bar.
The river will keep them off our backs, and they can only come at us across that one narrow place. It will do,
Belgarath agreed shortly.
Let's go.
They rode out onto the snow-covered bar and quickly scraped an area clear with their feet, while Dernick worked to build a fire under a large gray driftwood snag that half blocked the narrow neck of the bar. Within a few moments, orange flames began to lick up around the snag. Dernick fed the fire with sticks until the snag was fully ablaze. "Give me a hand," the smith said, starting to pile larger pieces of wood on the fire. Barak and Mandaralin went to the jumbled mass of driftwood piled against the upstream edge of the gravel and began hauling limbs and chunks of log to the fire. At the end of a quarter of an hour, they had built a roaring bonfire that stretched across the narrow neck of sand, cutting them off completely from the dark trees on the riverbank. "It's the first time I've been warm all day," Silk grinned, backing up to the fire. "They're coming," Garion warned. Back among the dark tree trunks, he had caught a few glimpses of furtive movements. Barak peered through the flames.
"Big brutes, aren't they?"
he observed grimly.
About the size of a donkey,
Belgarath confirmed. Are you sure they're afraid of fire? Silk asked nervously.
Most of the time.
Most of the time?
Once in a while they get desperate, or Gruul could drive them toward us. They'd be more afraid of him than of the fire.
Belgarath, the weasel-faced little man objected, sometimes you've got a nasty habit of keeping things to yourself. One of the rock wolves came out onto the riverbank just upstream from the bar and stood sniffing the air and looking nervously at the fire. Its forelegs were noticeably longer than its hind ones, giving it a peculiar half-erect stance, and there was a large, muscular hump across its shoulders. Its muzzle was short, and it seemed snub-faced, almost like a cat. Its coat was a splotchy black and white, marked with a pattern hovering somewhere between spots and stripes. It paced nervously back and forth, staring at them with a dreadful intensity and yelping its high-pitched, hooting laugh. It's not at all a hyena, it's a rock wolf. I guess it would be a really big hyena, but it's not. Although the short face, yeah, I don't know. Anyways. Soon, another came out to join it, and then another. They spread out along the bank, pacing and hooting, but staying well back from the fire. They don't look like dogs exactly, Dernick said.
They're not, Belgarath replied. Wolves and dogs are related, but rock wolves belong to a different family.
By now, 10 of the ugly creatures lined the bank, and their hooting rose in a mindless chorus. Then, Sinedra screamed, her face deathly pale, and her eyes wide with horror. The Eldrakyn shambled out of the trees and stood in the middle of the yelping pack. It was about 8 feet tall and covered with shaggy black fur. It wore an armored shirt that had been made of large scraps of chainmail tied together with thongs. Over the mail, also held in place with thongs, was a rusty breastplate that appeared to have been hammered out with rocks until it was big enough to fit around the creature's massive chest. A conical steel helmet, split up the back to make it fit, covered the brute's head. In its hand, the Eldrakyn held a huge, steel-wrapped club, studded with spikes. It was the face, however, that had brought the scream to Sinedra's lips. The Eldrakyn had virtually no nose. Oh, you know it's evil then. Oof. And its lower jaw jutted, showing 2 massive protruding tusks. Its eyes were sunk in deep sockets beneath a heavy ridge of bone across its brow, and they burned with a hideous hunger. Kind of sounds to me like the cross between a troll and an orc. The pig-faced orcs.
That's far enough, Gruul,
Belgarath warned the thing in a cold, deadly voice. Sharkies were thinking the same thing.
Grat come back to Gruul's mountains,
the monster growled. Its voice was deep and hollow, chilling. It talks, Silk gasped incredulously.
Why are you following us, Gruul?
Belgarath demanded. The creature stared at them, its eyes like fire.
Hungry, Grat,
it growled. Also like the trolls from Willow, but larger. Why am I not remembering the trolls from Willow? When did they show up? Were they just in the war? Or were they at that castle? Were they the, like, shambling things in the castle? Yeah, okay. The shambling thing, those things, yeah. Yeah, if those were bigger, for sure. I mean, I don't remember their faces, but I remember the way they moved, and they were all covered in hair, weren't they? I need to watch that again. It's been a long time, and there's a series that they're in the process of making. So definitely need to rewatch Willow before then. Out of the way, Peck!
Hungry, Grat,
It growled.
Go hunt something else,
The old man told the monster.
Why, horses here, men, plenty to eat. But not easy food, Gruel,
Belgarath replied. A hideous grin spread across Gruel's face.
Fight first,
He said.
then eat. Come, Grat, fight again.
Grat? Silk asked. Little old howler monkeys. Grat? Silk asked.
He means me. He can't pronounce my name. It has to do with the shape of his jaw. You fought that thing?
Barak sounded stunned. Barak sounded a little like Gruel. Belgarath shrugged.
I had a knife up my sleeve. When he grabbed me, I sliced him open. It wasn't much of a fight. Fight!
Gruel roared. He hammered on his breastplate with his huge fist.
Iron!
He said.
Come, Grat. Try to cut Gruel's belly again. Now Gruel wear iron, like men wear.
He began to pound on the frozen ground with his steel-shod club.
Fight!
He bellowed.
Come, Grat, fight! Maybe if we all go after him at once, one of us might get in a lucky thrust,
Barak said, eyeing the monster speculatively. Thy plan is flawed, my lord, Mandaralan told him. We must lose several companions should we come within range of that club. Barak looked at him in astonishment.
Prudence, Mandaralan. Prudence from you.
It were best, I think, should I undertake this alone, the knight stated gravely. My lance is the only weapon that can seek out the monster's life with safety. There's something to what he says, Petar agreed.
Come fight!
Gruel roared, still beating on the ground with his club.
All right,
Barak agreed dubiously.
We'll distract him then. Come at him from two sides to get his attention. Then Mandaralan can make his charge.
What about the rock wolves? Garion asked. Let me try something, Dernick said. He took up a burning stick and threw it, spinning and flaring, at the nervous pack surrounding the monster. The rock wolves yelped and shied quickly away from the tumbling brand. They're afraid of the fire, all right, the smith said. I think that if we all throw at once and keep throwing, their nerve will break and they'll run. They all moved to the fire. Now! Dernick shouted sharply. They began throwing the blazing sticks as fast as they could. The rock wolves yelped and dodged, and several of them screamed in pain as the tumbling firebrands singed them. Now notice, rock wolves and flaming sticks are not at all the same as wargs and flaming pine cones. Don't get them confused. Gruel roared in fury as the pack dodged and scurried around his feet, trying to escape the sudden deluge of fire. One of the singed beasts, maddened by pain and fright, tried to leap at him. The Eldrakyn jumped out of its way with astonishing agility and smashed the rock wolf to the ground with his great club.
He's quicker than I thought,
Barak said.
We'll have to be careful.
They're running, Dernick shouted, throwing another fiery stick. The pack had broken under the rain of burning brands and turned to flee howling back into the woods, leaving the infuriated Gruul standing alone on the riverbank, hammering at the snow-covered ground with his spiked club.
"Come fight!"
he roared again.
"Come fight!"
He advanced one huge step and smashed his club at the snow again. "We'd better do whatever we're going to do now," Silk said tensely. "He's getting himself worked up. We'll have him out here on the bar with us in another minute or two." Manderallen nodded grimly and turned to mount his charger. There it is.
"Let the rest of us distract him first,"
Barak said. He drew his heavy sword.
"Let's go!"
he shouted, and leaped over the fire. The others followed him, spreading out in a half-circle in front of the towering Gruul. Garion reached for his sword. "Not you," Aunt Pole snapped. "You stay here. But do as I say." One of Silk's daggers, skillfully thrown from several yards away, sank into Gruul's shoulder while the creature was advancing on Barak and Dernick. Gruul howled and turned to charge Silk and Hetar, swinging his vast club. Hetar dodged, and Silk danced back out of reach. Dernick began pelting the monster with fist-sized rocks from the riverbank. Gruul turned back, raging now, with flecks of foam dripping from his pointed tusks.
"No, Manderallen!"
Barak shouted. Manderallen couched his lance and spurred his warhorse. The huge, armored animal leaped forward, its hooves churning gravel, jumped the fire, and bore down on the astonished Gruul. For a moment, it looked as if their plan might work. The deadly, steel-pointed lance was leveled at Gruul's chest, and it seemed that nothing could stop it from plunging through his huge body. But the monster's quickness again astonished them all. He leaped to one side and smashed his spiked club down on Manderallen's lance, shattering the stout wood. The force of Manderallen's charge, however, could not be stopped. Horse and man crashed into the great brute with a deafening impact. Gruul reeled back, dropping his club, tripping, falling with Manderallen and his warhorse on top of him.
"Get him!"
Barak roared, and they all dashed forward to attack the fallen Gruul with swords and axes. The monster, however, levered his legs under Manderallen's thrashing horse and thrust the big animal off. A great, flailing fist caught Manderallen in the side, throwing him for several yards. Dernick spun and dropped, felled by a glancing blow to the head, even as Barak, Hetar, and Silk swarmed over the fallen Gruul. "Father!" Aunt Pole cried in a ringing voice. There was suddenly a new sound directly behind Garion. First, a deep, rumbling snarl, followed instantly by a hair-raising howl. Garion turned quickly and saw the huge wolf he had seen once before in the forests of northern Erendia. The old gray wolf bounded across the fire and entered the fight, his great teeth flashing and tearing. "Garion, I need you!" Aunt Pole was shaking off the panic-stricken princess and pulling her amulet out of her bodice. "Take out your medallion! Quickly!" He did not understand, but he drew his amulet out from under his tunic. Aunt Pole reached out, took his right hand, and placed the mark of his palm against the figure of the owl on her own talisman. At the same time, she took his medallion in her other hand. "Focus your will," she commanded. On what? On the amulets! Quickly! Garion brought his will to bear, feeling the power building in him tremendously, amplified somehow by his contact with Aunt Pole and the two amulets. Polgara closed her eyes and raised her face to the leaden sky. "Mother!" she cried in a voice so loud that the echo rang like a trumpet note in the narrow valley. The power surged out of Garion in so vast a rush that he collapsed to his knees, unable to stand. Aunt Pole sank down beside him. Sinedra gasped. As Garion weakly raised his head, he saw that there were two wolves attacking the raging Gruul. The gray old wolf he knew to be his grandfather, and another, slightly smaller wolf that seemed surrounded by a strange, flickering blue light. Gruul had struggled to his feet and was laying about him with his huge fists as the men attacking him chopped futilely at his armored body. Barak was flung out of the fight and fell to his hands and knees, shaking his head groggily. Gruul brushed Hetar aside, his eyes alight with dreadful glee as he lunged toward Barak with both huge arms raised. But the blue wolf leaped snarling at his face. Gruul swung his fist and gaped with astonishment as it passed directly through the flickering body. Then he shrieked with pain and began to topple backward as Belgarath, darting in from behind to employ the wolf's ancient tactic, neatly hamstrung him with great ripping teeth. The towering Gruul, howling, fell and struck the earth like some vast tree.
"Keep him down!"
Barak roared, stumbling to his feet and staggering forward. The wolves were ripping at Gruul's face, and he flailed his arms, trying to beat them away. Again and again his hands passed through the body of the strange, flickering blue wolf. Mandaralin, his feet spread wide apart and holding the hilt of his broadsword with both hands, chopped steadily at the monster's body, his great blade shearing long rents in Gruul's breastplate. Barak swung huge blows at Gruul's head, his sword striking sparks from the rusty steel helmet. Hetar crouched at one side, eyes intent, saber ready, waiting. Gruul raised his arm to ward off Barak's blows, and Hetar lunged, thrusting his saber through the exposed armpit and into the huge chest. A bloody froth spouted from Gruul's mouth as the saber ripped through his lungs. He struggled to a half-sitting position. Then Silk, who had lurked just at the edge of the fight, darted in, set the point of his dagger against the back of Gruul's neck, and smashed a large rock against the dagger's pommel. With a sickening crunch, the dagger drove through bone, angling up into the monster's brain. Gruul shuddered convulsively. Then he collapsed. In the moment of silence that followed, the two wolves looked at each other across the monster's dead face. The blue wolf seemed to wink once, in a voice which Garion could hear quite clearly, a woman's voice. She said, "How remarkable." With a seeming smile and one last flicker, she vanished. The old gray wolf raised his muzzle and howled, a sound of such piercing anguish and loss that Garion's heart wrenched within him. Then the old wolf seemed to shimmer, and Belgarath knelt in his place. He rose slowly to his feet and walked back toward the fire, tears streaming openly down his grizzled cheeks. That's the end of chapter 14. Eesh. Big fight. Probably one of the longest and most thoroughly described fights I think we've had. And probably the most dangerous fight I think we've encountered so far. Multiple of our protagonists getting knocked around and dazed and staggered and being in danger. They definitely have a tougher time against monsters than people most of the time, it seems like. Well, we finished chapter 14. It's not quite 8 o'clock yet. Chapter 15 isn't too long. 9 pages again. Sharky's imagine it would take a lot to throw Mandaralen's horse and Barak and Mandaralan as well in all of his armor. His horse wearing armor too, yeah. Apparently Gruul is very strong. Dernick took a glancing hit. Hetar got tossed around. Well, should I jump into chapter 15? Should we get through another 9 pages tonight? Or are people feeling tuckered out? Sure. Alright, let's do it then. We were talking about what to have for dinner tonight earlier. And I just remembered there is a Greek food I want to try and find. I think maybe I tried a very long time ago. Pastitsio, which looks kind of like a little bit like lasagna, but not really. And lasagna is one of my favorite foods. Probably my actual favorite food. Yeah, pastitsio. Apparently it's usually like ground beef noodles and like a bechamel sauce. So it seems similar to lasagna, but different noodles, and the sauce looks like it's made differently. It's kind of thick on top and sort of seared without necessarily all the cheese that, like, other types of cheese that lasagna might have. Just thinking of that as I think about what to look for dinner. But I don't know whether I'll be able to find it or not. I don't know whether any of the restaurants around here have it. Sorry, just came to mind as I was thinking about the time and what's going to happen after the stream. Anyways, chapter 15.
Is he going to be all right?
Barak asked anxiously, hovering over the still unconscious Dernick, as Aunt Pole examined the large purple contusion on the side of the smith's face. "It's nothing serious," she replied, in a voice seeming to droop with a great weariness. Geryon sat nearby with his head in his hands. He felt as if all the strength had been wrenched out of his body. Beyond the heaped coals of the rapidly dying bonfire, Silk and Hetar were struggling to remove Mandaralen's dented breastplate. A deep crease, running diagonally from shoulder to hip, gave mute evidence of the force of Gruul's blow and placed so much stress on the straps beneath the shoulder plates that they were almost impossible to unfasten. "I think we are going to have to cut them," Silk said.
"I pray thee, Prince Keldar, avoid that if possible,"
Mandaralan answered, wincing as they wrenched at the fastenings.
"Those straps are crucial to the fit of the armor and are most difficult to replace properly." "This one's coming now,"
Hetar grunted, prying at a buckle with a short iron rod. The buckle released suddenly, and the taut breastplate rang like a softly struck bell. "Now I can get it," Silk said, quickly loosening the other shoulder buckle. Mandaralan sighed with relief as they pulled off the dented breastplate. He took a deep breath and winced again. "Tender right here?" Silk asked, putting his fingers lightly to the right side of the knight's chest. Mandaralan grunted with pain, and his face paled visibly.
I think you've got some cracked ribs, my splendid friend, Silk told him. You'd better have Polgara take a look. In a moment, Mandaralin said. My horse. He'll be all right, Hatar replied. A strained tendon in his right foreleg is all. Mandaralin let out a sigh of relief. I had feared for him. I feared for us all there for a while, Silk said. Our oversized playmate there was almost more than we could handle. Good fight, though, Hatar remarked. Silk gave him a disgusted look, then glanced up at the scudding grey clouds overhead. He jumped across the glowing coals of their fire and went over to where Belgarath sat staring into the icy river. We're going to have to get off this bar, Belgarath, he urged. The weather's going bad on us again, and we'll all freeze to death if we stay out here in the middle of the river tonight. Leave me alone, Belgarath muttered shortly, still staring at the river.
It was nice to see Mandaralin worrying about his horse before he, went to go get himself tended to. I feel like that's practically only the third time the horses have been paid any real attention to. There was the time that the one horse kind of joked about having to carry Barak to Hetar. There was, of course, the cave, the scene in the cave. And I mean, I'm not counting all the interactions with the Colt specifically, because the Colt is almost its own character. Almost, what am I talking about? The Colt is its own character. But yeah, and now Mandaralin worrying about the health of his horse.
Polgara, Silk turned to her. Just stay away from him for a while, she told him. Go find a sheltered place for us to stay for a few days. I'll go with you, Barak offered, hobbling toward his horse. You'll stay here, Aunt Pole declared firmly. You creak like a wagon with a broken axle. I want to have a look at you before you get a chance to damage yourself permanently. I know a place, Sinedra said, rising and pulling her cloak about her shoulders. I saw it when we were coming down the river. I'll show you. Silk looked inquiringly at Aunt Pole. Go ahead, she told him. It's safe enough now. Nothing else would live in the same valley with an Eldrak. Silk laughed. I wonder why. Coming, princess? The two of them mounted and rode off through the snow. Shouldn't Dernick be coming around? Garion asked his aunt. Let him sleep, she replied wearily. He'll have a blinding headache when he wakes up. Aunt Pole? Yes? Who was the other wolf? My mother, Poledra. But isn't she... Yes, it was her spirit. You can do that? Garion was stunned by the enormity of it. Not alone, she said. You had to help me. Is that why I feel so... It was an effort even to talk. It took everything we could both raise to do it. Don't ask so many questions just now, Garion. I'm very tired, and I still have many things to do. Is grandfather all right? He'll come around. Mandaralin, come here. The knight stepped over the coals at the neck of the bar and walked slowly toward her, his hand pressed lightly against his chest. You'll have to take off your shirt, she told him, and please sit down. About a half hour later,
Silk and the princess returned. "It's a good spot," Silk reported. "A thicket in a little ravine. Water, shelter, everything we need. Is anybody seriously hurt?" "Nothing permanent." Aunt Pole was applying a salve to Barak's hairy leg. Does chest look unnecessarily bold? I don't notice. Let's see. Mandarellen, come here. Nope. No, it looks normal to me. It's right there. Chesto. Yours has a weird, like... Do you think it's bolded or just an issue with the print? His hand pressed lightly against his chest. Yours has misprint extra bold. That's odd. No, this copy that I'm reading is in pretty good shape, and I haven't noticed anything too weird about it. Some of my other copies are a little tattered. Not the worst shape of, books I've read, but some of them are well loved.
"Do you suppose you could hurry, Polgara?"
Barak asked.
"It's a little chilly for standing around half-dressed."
"Stop being such a baby," she said heartlessly. The ravine to which Silk and Sinedra led them was a short way back upriver. A small mountain brook trickled from its mouth, and a dense thicket of spindly pines filled it seemingly from wall to wall. They followed the brook for a few hundred yards until they came to a small clearing in the center of the thicket. The pines around the inner edge of the clearing, pressed by the limbs of the others in the thicket, leaned inward, almost touching above the center of the open area. "Good spot." Hatar looked around approvingly. "How did you find it?" "She did." Silk nodded at Sinedra. "The trees told me it was here," she said. "Young pine trees babble a lot." She looked at the clearing thoughtfully. "We'll build our fire there," she decided, pointing at a spot near the brook at the upper edge of the clearing, "and set up our tents along the edge of the trees just back from it. You will need to pile rocks around the fire and clear away all the twigs from the ground near it. The trees are very nervous about the fire. They promise to keep the wind off us, but only if we keep our fire strictly under control. I gave them my word." A faint smile flickered across Hatar's hawk-like face. "I'm serious," she said, stamping her little foot. "Of course, Your Highness," he replied, bowing. Because of the incapacity of the others, the work of setting up the tents and building the fire pit fell largely upon Silk and Hatar. Sinedra commanded them like a little general, snapping out her orders in a clear, firm voice. She seemed to be enjoying herself immensely. Garion was sure that it was some trick of the fading light, but the trees almost seemed to draw back when the fire first flared up, though after a while they seemed to lean back in again to arch protectively over the little clearing. Wearily, he got to his feet and began to gather sticks and dead limbs for firewood. See, gathering firewood, something that comes up occasionally. We were talking about previously what their pack horses would have been loaded up with. "Now," Sinedra said, bustling about the fire in a thoroughly business-like way, "what would you all like for supper?" They stayed in their protected little clearing for 3 days, while their battered warriors and Mandarellen's horse recuperated from the encounter with the Eldrakyn. The exhaustion which had fallen upon Garion when Aunt Pole had summoned all his strength to help call the spirit of Poledra was largely gone after one night's sleep. Polgara's too tired. But I guess it's what they want. Though he tired easily during the next day. He found Sinedra's officiousness in her domain near the fire almost unbearable, so he passed some time helping Dernick hammer the deep crease out of Mandaralen's breastplate. After that, he spent as much time as possible with the horses. He began teaching the colt a few simple tricks, though he had never attempted training animals before. The colt seemed to enjoy it, although his attention wandered frequently. I'm not even going to attempt to make any comparisons here. Just knowing it was a horse versus a human. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the horse needs the rest. Take pity. The incapacity of Dernick, Barak, and Mandaralen was easy to understand, but Belgarath's deep silence and seeming indifference to all around him worried Garion. The old man appeared to be sunk in a melancholy reverie that he could not, or would not, shake off. Aunt Pole, Garion said finally on the afternoon of the third day, you'd better do something. We'll be ready to leave soon, and Grandfather has to be able to show us the way. Right now, I don't think he even cares where he is. Grand angst. Aunt Pole looked across at the old sorcerer, who sat on a rock, staring into the fire. Possibly you're right. Come with me. She led the way around the fire and stopped directly in front of the old man. All right, Father, she said crisply. I think that's about enough.
Go away, Polgara,
he told her. No, Father, she replied. It's time for you to put it away and come back to the real world.
That was a cruel thing to do, Pole,
he said reproachfully. To Mother, she didn't seem to mind.
How do you know that? You never knew her. She died when you were born.
What's that got to do with it? She looked at him directly. Father, she declared pointedly, you, of all people, should know that Mother was extremely strong-minded. She's always been with me, and we know each other very well. He looked dubious. She has her part to play in this just the same as the rest of us do. If you'd been paying attention all these years, you'd have realized that she's never really been gone. The old man looked around a little guiltily. Precisely, Aunt Pole said, with just the hint of a barb in her voice. You really should have behaved yourself, you know. Mother's very tolerant for the most part, but there were times when she was quite vexed with you. Belgarath coughed uncomfortably. Now, it's time for you to pull yourself out of this and stop feeling sorry for yourself, she continued crisply. His eyes narrowed.
That's not entirely fair, Polgara, he replied.
I don't have time to be fair, Father.
Why did you choose that particular form?
He asked with a hint of bitterness. I didn't, Father. She did. It's her natural form, after all.
I'd almost forgotten that,
he mused. She didn't. It's her natural form. How's that? Is that weird? Yep. I suspect we may learn about that later. Old men and sexy wolves. The old man straightened and drew back his shoulders.
Is there any food around?
He asked suddenly.
The princess has been doing the cooking, Garion warned him. You might want to think it over before you decide to eat anything she's had a hand in.
Hopefully she was out of earshot for that.
The next morning, under a still threatening sky, they struck their tents, packed their gear again, and rode down along the narrow bed of the brook back into the river valley. Did you thank the trees, dear? Aunt Pole asked the princess. Yes, Lady Polgara, Sinedra replied, just before we left.
Now, I know you're saying Nickelodeon, but I really want to read that as like Nietzscheolodian. The special Greek channel or something. I probably pronounced that wrong anyways. Yes, Lady Polgara, Sinedra replied, just before we left. Oh yeah, no, I don't blame you for the typos. That's very understandable. That's nice, Aunt Pole said. The weather continued to threaten for the next 2 days, and finally the blizzard broke in full fury as they approached a strangely pyramidal peak. Pyramidal. The sloping walls of the peak were steep, rising sharply up into the swirling snow, and they seemed to have none of the random irregularities of the surrounding mountains. Though he rejected the idea immediately, Garion could not quite overcome the notion that the curiously angular peak had somehow been constructed, that its shape was the result of a conscious design. You can't do that on television. The title is familiar, but was that a UK show? Or is that... Well, it's nice to have you here, Books, Brews, and Booze. Yeah, hopefully you can join us on Friday. We'll do something to celebrate. But have a good night. See you next time. We're almost done here anyways. It was a Canadian show. YTV? Or was it like CBC? I'll have to look it up because the title is definitely familiar, so I'm sure I would recognize it. Oh, fancy. YTV once YTV started. Is YTV not that old? I think TVO before that. Oh boy. Alright.
Prolgu,
Belgrath said, pointing at the peak with one hand while he clung to his wind-whipped cloak with the other. How do we get up there? Silk asked, staring at the steep walls dimly visible in the driving snow.
There's a road,
the old man replied.
It starts over there.
Oh. He pointed to a vast pile of jumbled rock to one side of the peak.
We'd better hurry then, Belgarath, Barak said. "This storm isn't going to improve much."
The old man nodded and moved his horse into the lead.
"When we get up there,"
he shouted back to them over the sound of the shrieking wind,
"we'll find the city. It's abandoned, but you may see a few things lying about. Broken pots, some other things. Don't touch any of them. The Ulgos have some peculiar beliefs about Prolgu. It's a very holy place to them, and everything there is supposed to stay just where it is." "How do we get down into the caves?"
Barak asked.
"The Ulgos will let us in," Belgarath assured him. "They already know we're here."
The road that led to the mountaintop was a narrow ledge, inclining steeply up and around the sides of the peak. They dismounted before they started up and led their horses. The wind tugged at them as they climbed, and the driving snow, more pellets than flakes, stung their faces. Oh, I know that snow. It's a weird snow. Rupees? Ding ding ding. I kind of want to 3D print a rupee, but I feel like I would need to get a transparent or translucent PLA to do that, like a translucent green, and even then that wouldn't look quite right. Maybe print like a solid one with like a translucent green case to go over top of it. That might look good. It took them 2 hours to wind their way to the top, and Garion was numb with cold by the time they got there. The wind seemed to batter at him, trying to pluck him off the ledge, and he made a special point of staying as far away from the edge as possible. Though the wind had been brutal on the sides of the peak, once they reached the top, it howled at them with unbroken force. They passed through a broad, arched gate into the deserted city of Prolgu, with snow swirling about them and the wind shrieking insanely in their ears. There were columns lining the empty streets, tall, thick columns reaching up into the dancing snow. The buildings, all unroofed by time and the endless progression of the seasons, had a strange, alien quality about them. Accustomed to the rigid rectangularity of the structures in the other cities he had seen, Garion was unprepared for the sloped corners of Ulgo architecture. Nothing seemed exactly square. The complexity of the angles teased at his mind, suggesting a subtle sophistication that somehow just eluded him. There was a massiveness about the construction that seemed to defy time, and the weathered stones sat solidly, one atop the other, precisely as they had been placed thousands of years before. That sort of thing kind of sounds to me like Lovecraftian, sort of, you know, that like you can almost understand something, but you can't. Like there's something there, but you can't figure it out. Yeah, that's true. Our heroes are freezing cold and we are boiling hot. Dernick seemed also to have noticed the peculiar nature of the structures, and his expression was one of disapproval. Bingo. As they all moved behind a building to get out of the wind, and to rest for a moment from the exertions of the climb, he ran his hand up one of the slanted corners. "Hadn't they ever heard of a plumb line?" he muttered critically.
"Where do we go to find the Ulgos?"
Barak asked, pulling his bearskin cloak even tighter about him.
"It isn't far,"
Belgarath answered. They led their horses back out into the blizzard-swept streets, past the strange pyramidal buildings.
An eerie place, Mandaralan said, looking around him. How long hath it been abandoned thus? Since Torak cracked the world, Belgarath replied. About 5,000 years. They trudged across a broad street through the deepening snow to a building somewhat larger than the ones about it, and passed inside through a wide doorway surmounted by a huge stone lintel. Inside, the air hung still and calm. A few flakes of snow drifted down through the silent air, sifting through the narrow opening at the top where the roof had been and lightly dusting the stone floor. Belgarath moved purposefully to a large black stone in the precise center of the floor. The stone was cut in such a way as to duplicate the truncated pyramid shape of the buildings in the city, angling up to a flat surface about 4 feet above the floor. So, flat. Don't touch it, he warned them, carefully stepping around the stone. Is it dangerous? Barak asked. No, Belgarath said. It's holy. The Ulgos don't want it profaned. They believe that Ul himself placed it here. Like a ziggurat. Yeah. Without the staircase shape, I think. Just sort of slope and then flat. But yeah. And I don't know if the staircase shape is necessary for something to be a ziggurat, so. He studied the floor intently, scraping away the thin dusting of snow with his foot in several places. Pyramid with the top cut off, yep. Let's see. He frowned slightly. Then he uncovered a single flagstone that seemed a slightly different color from those surrounding it. Here we are, he grunted. I always have to look for it. Give me your sword, Barak. Wordlessly, the big man drew his sword and handed it to the old sorcerer. Belgarath knelt beside the flagstone he'd uncovered and rapped sharply on it 3 times with the pommel of Barak's heavy sword. The sound seemed to echo hollowly from underneath. The old man waited for a moment, then repeated his signal. Nothing happened. A third time, Belgarath hammered his 3 measured strokes on the echoing flagstone. A slow, grinding sound started in one corner of the large chamber. What's that? Silk demanded nervously. The Ulgos, Belgarath replied, rising to his feet and dusting off his knees. They're opening the portal to the caves. The grinding continued, and a line of faint light appeared suddenly about 20 feet out from the east wall of the chamber. The line became a crack, and then slowly yawned wider as a huge stone in the floor tilted up, rising with a ponderous slowness. The light from below seemed very dim. Belgarath, a deep voice echoed from beneath the slowly tilting stone. Yad ho, Groja Ul. Yad ho, Groja Ul, vad marishum, Belgarath responded formally. Vid mo, Belgarath, mar isham Ulgo, the unseen speaker said. What was that? Garion asked in perplexity. He invited us into the caves, the old man said. Shall we go down now? And that's the end of chapter 15. Good place to stop. I like that chapter. It felt like just about everybody in the group contributed something at some point or another. Between the fight with Gruul and the resting afterwards.
I wonder whether David Eddings was consciously trying to include all of the characters more. Because I think basically everybody did something. Even Sinedra contributed. I don't know if Sinedra has really contributed very much before. Though we didn't hear what everyone wanted for dinner after Sinedra asked. Yep, that's true. And 3 days later, apparently the cooking did not improve. But, you know, besides that, she also found their camp spot, which was apparently quite appreciated. Maybe it was their requests. Yeah, it wasn't her fault. They were just making bad requests for dinner. I want pastizio for dinner. Sinedra, can you do that? So yeah, some interesting stuff there. Big tense fight. And then the aftermath. Recovery, and I think this is also probably the first time they've really had to recover very much from a fight. I mean, Garion's been bonked on the bean a few times, but Mandorellin's armor got dented inwards, and he cracked ribs, and Barak apparently busted up his leg in some fashion, and Dernick had a concussion, got knocked unconscious. It's very dangerous. Had a purple contusion on his head. Silk and Hetar seemed fine. They were the ones that were left to organize the camp. And Garion and Polgara and Sinedra were, well, I mean, Garion and Polgara were very tired for a day and a half, basically, but yeah, I think for sure our riskiest fight so far. Princess, could you possibly fail at a baked potato? Silk asked. You know what? It is definitely possible to fail at a baked potato. It doesn't get cooked all the way through, or you burn it. I mean, if you burn it, hopefully you don't burn it all the way to its core. But burn the outside, don't cook the inside, something like that. Assuming they have potatoes with them. They probably do. Potatoes are a... You once had a baked potato at Denny's that no longer tasted like potato. I generally avoid Denny's when possible, personally. No offense, Denny's. Please don't send the hit squad after me, but it's not really for me. Well, it's 8:30. We got through 2 chapters pretty quickly today. Wasn't burnt or undercooked, just not potato. Did it taste like something else, or was it just sort of nothing? Looks like Slightly Stupid Bear is playing some Deep Rock Galactic. Just a bland weirdness. So I think we should go visit him. He just had, I think he just had his birthday this past week. So everybody should go over and wish him a happy birthday. I think he'd appreciate that. Happy belated birthday. Yeah, he seems like a cool guy. And Deep Rock Galactic is fun. Space dwarves, mining. And yeah, I'll be back on Friday, and if anybody thinks of anything that I should do for the celebration on Friday, send me a message, let me know. But yeah, have a good evening, have a good Thursday and Friday, and we'll see you Friday evening. So yeah, I'm going to start a raid up now. And yeah, go say hi to Bear. He'd be happy. All right. Have a good night, everybody. And by Friday, those new emotes should be ready to go. Those will be fun. Okay. See you then. Bye.